Nissan Cube driver's side door window doesn't work any longer. The problem sort of came in an intermittent fashion for a while, and then it just stopped. And it's a simple fix. Go to the dealer and they'll charge you several $100s for that. Today we're going to get this thing fixed for about $35 or $40. So here we go. So the first thing to get this door open is to take this part out, and it's literally just snapped in there, just like so, with these little clips. No biggie. Put it aside. Next thing, you don't need any special tools or anything like that. What you need to do is pop the door off, and it's just literally held on with these clips like that. I think, not sure exactly how many there are, but that's how they go. And once it's okay,
the red button disappeared.
so in order to get this door off, I forgot this has to come off first. There's one little screw in here, little Phillips screw. Take that out, put it out of the way, and it's really kind of clever. Just lift the back end of it here and lift it forward, backwards there. You can see the little clip here that holds the front. This is the switch mechanism, and in this car it's already been replaced pretty easily. Just pull these little clips like that out of the way a little bit on both sides, and it's out of the way. And if you care to replace this, if you think this is broken, this is literally a $20 part. But for the time being, we have to get it out of the way, so just pinch it right here. Pinch it right there. And do the same on the small one. Get that out of the way. Tuck that in there, and now the door panel itself, which we pop the clips on, you lift it up and just pull it out of the way. There's your door panel. Over here. That's the back of the door panel. We don't need to worry about this, but you can see these are the clips that hold it in. Some of them are still stuck in the door. We're going to deal with that later, so we're going to set it aside. Okay, a couple more things to get out of the way. This little thing that was holding the switch assembly, we're just going to get it out of our way for now. This is a 10mm. It's the only socket you're going to need for this whole job. And the reason that I'm showing you this whole thing on a video is because a lot of people asked if you can replace just the motor without pulling the whole regulator, the whole assembly apart with the steel cable and such. And the answer is yes, you can, and that's what you're going to see here. We've got to get this out of the way. The speaker gets unhooked. Another one of these little pinch it and pull it kind of things. And sometimes they want to be tricky. Okay, so the cables are loose. Next thing we're doing, the moisture barrier's got to get out of the way because we're going to work behind it. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with. This is a new motor, literally costs about 35 bucks, that's all. and it's sitting right there like this. And what's holding it in place just like that is not these bolts. That's an assembly that's got the steel cable and everything that lifts the window, and it's actually wrapped around it like this, with 3 bolts holding it onto that little assembly. Those 3 right there, and those plus these in the front are what we're going to have to undo to get that motor out of there. So if I can get the camera in here, that right there in the reflection in that mirror is, you can see that's where the cable is. That's what's holding the motor. And if you look right underneath, you're going to feel those 3 bolts that hold the motor in that assembly. So don't really need a motor, but what you don't need to do anything more other than right now know that we're going to get a hex bit, and we're going to work around the back to undo those 3 bolts that hold this assembly onto the motor. You can see how this is mounted in there, and you can see there's three bolts. Where they are is right there, there, and there. You can feel them before you start working on them. So now the tedious part is getting behind there with your hex wrench and undoing them. Okay, there's one, and you can see these are the little hex bolts that are holding it together, and this is what I'm undoing it with. Okay, so while I was undoing the second bolt that's right about here, I dropped it. It's down there in the bottom, so you'll need a little magnet tool like this to fish it out, like so. Okay, so the motor is actually unbolted from that assembly, but before I take them apart like this, I want to make sure that this doesn't fall. So I'm just going to secure it with some masking tape. Stop. Okay, so I'm going to undo the assembly that holds the steel cable that drives it up and down, holds the motor, everything else. That is held into the door by 3 bolts, 10mm again. And you don't have to worry about it falling, because they were smart enough to put these little hooks in here to hold it onto the door to let you work on it while you're undoing it or redoing it. So it's not bolted to the door anymore. You can see it's all loose. So I'm going to undo this connector that drives the motor. Tricky. Okay. And I'm just going to move it aside. It's just not in the way right now. So you can see the whole thing now. Carefully move it around, but the motor is actually free to come off of that track right now. But you're going to have to work it off, because there's a little tension on it, and that's why I wanted to tape the window. There's just a little bit of tension holding it. Okay. So you've pulled it off the front. That's the old motor right there. Okay, just for the time being, I'm going to show you, we're going to put the switch mechanism back together. We're going to take the old motor that I just pulled out of the door and plug it back in and show you that that's a dead motor. doesn't do anything. Okay, so this is all plugged back in. The door window, you can see the motor that I just took out of there that was not rolling the window up and down appears to be working, but it's just tired. It doesn't have enough power, whatever, to roll the window up and down, and that's why we're replacing it. Okay, so one more thing that you can do to test: grab yourself a 1/2-inch wrench with an extension, and where the motor was plugged into that little assembly that drives the window up and down, I forget what the name of it is, you could literally, turning that, roll the window up and down, and it runs nice and free. So part of the problem was not that, it was simply the motor. The whole mechanism that drives it up and down, that the motor drives up and down, is working just fine. Nothing wrong with it. So you can test it like that. Okay. So the next challenge is, you see I untaped the window so that I can move, and you can see where it's going to get plugged in right there in that little square. But the holes that the motor has that get screwed into that back plate also have to line up. So I'm going to sort of make it line up by letting the window turn so that it lines up with the motor as I line up the bolts to connect this thing back together. All right, we're going to stick this motor in there where it belongs. You see that piece that I'm putting it in is in my left hand. I'm going to just line those up so that drive coming out of the motor lines up with that other piece. Okay, so the motor is now in that assembly, but the holes are probably not lining. Oh, look at that, they do. See that? Can you see that right there? That hole is actually lined up. Just coincidentally, I don't have to do a whole lot of farting around to get that in there. So I'm going to put one of the bolts in there before I put the other two in. Okay. I got this one in, started. The bottom one, I'm going to get that one started. Okay. Just before I get to putting this whole car back together again, now that the thing is screwed together in the back, the motor is actually screwed into this whole thing. It's not bolted to the window yet, but it's bolted into the rest of it. So what I'm going to do is quickly find out if everything's hooked up right, working. So look at that. Isn't that nice? That's the way it's supposed to work. Okay, so we're going to secure this thing back to the door the way it was with those 3 bolts. Okay, now this is the old motor, and you notice the connector is literally a part of it all bolted onto there. The replacement motor has it out here on a cable, so apparently you can put it anywhere you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect it the same way as it wants to be, like that. But to keep it away from the window as it goes up and down, I'm going to take the cable part of it, put a twist tie right there on it, so that everything's nice and safe, doesn't have a place to go. There's plenty of room between the glass and this thing so that it won't hit anything. Okay. So in putting it all back together, the first thing to do is put these little cables through that cut in the moisture shield. Just stuff them through there. And then put this thing right back up where it belongs, like so. And some of that little sticky stuff is still on the door, and some of it's on the plastic. Bottom line is it all comes back together where it belongs, like so. And the door panel is going to help hold that anyway. So, right back where it was. And then we've got this little bracket for the switches that goes like so. And the 10mm will finish that off. Okay, obviously we're going to want to hear our radio, so that cable goes back on there. Okay, so before we put the door panel on, you'll notice that when we took it off, some of these little clips that hold it, they're still in the door, but one of them up here is still in the door itself, and that's not going to work because when you press it on there, there's no place to go. This actually has to be put back into the door panel and then popped on there. So I'm going to take that off, just nice and easy, like so, and put it right where this one came from. Just slide it right in there. And if you break any of these, you can go to any hardware, any automotive store, and they have these for just about every car made. So once they're all in, putting this thing back on is really simple. You take those cables and bring them through here, like so, and then lift the door up into this, right up against the window, so it drops down into it just like that, and then literally just pop that guy back in like that. It's good to go. And then this piece that holds it down from coming out gets popped in there like so. The door is put back together, and then we put the switch assembly back together. Just pops right in there. Woohoo, right? It gets connected back up like so, nice and secure, and then you feed this clip right here onto that to hold that, like so. Pop it down in there, and over here, all we're going to do is put the one screw right there that holds that switch assembly. And the job is done. All that's required now is to turn the accessory on. Turn it on. And watch that you now have a functioning window. And then, nice. Job's done.